Well, welcome to the Nexus, Heidi. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me. Thanks for having
Oh,
Professor.
I've
Hmm.
been wanting to have you on for a long time, and it's because of the number of conversations that we've been engaged with, and whether interactively on your show or on somebody else's shows, and in the group Gab known as the Geezer Geeks, of which you are a Geezer Geek gal, and we have had a number of very synchronistic and I think beautifulness of the vibe of how we just kind of tune into the same things, which is based on frequencies and vibration and
Yes.
energy,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And a lot of stories going around in various fields, from the ufology to the paraphology to the who knows what EIEIO phology. And there's just a lot of air being sucked out of the oxygen being sucked out of the air of the conversations with all these things. And I, for one, feel, and I think you are of this same perspective. You got to get down to the personal experience. You got to get
Uh-huh.
down to the actual evidence that you have of your personal experience for yourself.
Yep.
And does that translate to the experience and the relationships and the vibe that you share with others? And I think you are one of the most authentic expressions of that I know.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That means a lot because that's what I'm trying to put out there. Um, you know, doesn't matter about the growth or the likes in a way. It's like I'm still walking the walk, talking the talk. I'm out there in the 3D doing what I say I'm doing. Not just talking about wanting to do it. I'm doing it.
Well, and I think that, that's where this the focus of our conversation today is on this concept of superhumans versus normal humans. And I am one of the thought that the distinction between the two have been kind of used, abused, maybe even hijacked, because the majority of what I see as what people classify as superhuman is actually the latent, inherent nature, habit, and characteristics of our consciousness. And some people have, a much more intense, acute expression of that than others. You can liken it to an athlete in a particular sport. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm 5'10" on a good day, but I am not getting out there with LeBron James. It's just not going to happen. The frequency and vibration of his expression is just way beyond what mine is in that particular skill set.
In that
So
particular
I think
skill set, but you'd run hoops around him with a lot of other things. I worked with him, and yeah, not to my taste.
well, and that's a whole
Side
nother
note,
rabbit hole
yeah,
we could go down.
I
But
know. Another
but
tangent.
I'm just using it as an analogy, as a
Yeah,
compare and contrast,
of
right?
course.
And I think, from what I know of what you're doing, you left one previous iteration of life and transferred and transitioned into another.
Yes.
Can you give a brief description of you went from here and
Yeah.
now you're here?
Yes. And I think the first term, I guess all of it would be it being of service to others. But I was in motion picture for quite a long time. I was in front of the camera and then I was behind the camera. And for the last 15 years, it was behind. But I was in constant service to others. I was a union crew girl, but I was basically like the snack girl on set. So I was taking care of everybody. And it was very draining. It was very taxing. It was very laborious. It's very fit.
Right.
But I loved it. I loved it. However, when the world flipped on 2020 and that ended for me, it was one of those, you know, it felt imbalanced. I saw how imbalanced it was. And then I also saw my two children, who I'm a mother. I was like, oh, there they are. I just kept putting them in this great school, like, okay, they're taken care of. But it's no, I want to take care of them. I'm going to become the primary caregiver here. And so that's how I flipped my world. And really because of the giant, because he did help oversee the house and became head of household. And I could take that downtime to become their primary caregiver and then focus on their educational journey. As the world was changing, even the safe space I put them in, I just didn't adhere to how they were reopening. Let's say that. It was just, I was like, well, this isn't in alignment with what I thought they stood for. So I realized we have to create something new here. And so I went into the education of children. Now, it is like 25 or maybe even 30 years after the fact. I did go to university for early childhood education to become a teacher. There was a background of academia there. However, what I saw, what was happening in the school systems in the late 90s, I just backed out and went right into motion picture. I was not there to defend the children or protect them. And what I'm speaking of is, when the medical mafia came in, let's say that, I was like, well, this isn't child-led learning that I was hoping for, because I was very much raised like that. I had a mother that really, she helped me develop my imagination, my creativity. I had a lot of child-led childhood. It was really for the betterment of me, and it was a very, inspiring childhood. And I thought that would be really neat to inspire a lot of kids at once. And then I realized the control that either state-run schools or the academic agendas that were out there, I was like, well, nope, that's not what I thought it was. And I was already kind of making some waves in motion picture. So I'm like, I'll just go over here. And so when everything changed just 4 years ago, I was like, well, I got to go with what resonates and what feels right. And I just I put all my chips in on the education for my kids. And that's when I said, well, I'm definitely not going back to the old systems. I'm lawfully not allowed to because of all these things that happen in California regarding mandates and medical choice. So I'm like, let's create. And as I was creating, it was pretty overwhelming. But you said to go short, but I'm saying more things.
No, you're good. You're good. This is all good.
Well, as I was creating, I realized this is overwhelming. So I had other people educate them, but I'm wanting to bring in, Qigong and meditation, try to bring in the woo a little bit. And I'm like, I just wish there was a place like this. Well, it turns out because I shifted my focus, my social circle shifted as well. And I started finding other families and parents who felt the same way I did. And that's when it was like the speakeasies came out of the hangouts and who's going where and who's doing what. And I found this beautiful learning enrichment center that stayed open and really is a child-led learning educational journey for children. And I just aligned with it right away. I got my children enrolled and put them there for a year while I took a step back and began podcasting some more and did things like that. But then I'm like, I got to get in there. I want to help. So it was like, put me in, coach. So I started being an assistant. And then within a year, I was given my own classroom. So now I'm about to start my second year with my own class. And it's the same kids I had last year. We grow together. So academically, you grow with the child, which I'm a huge fan of, big proponent of. And it's a bunch of homeschoolers.
Isn't that similar to what you were saying about your childhood?
Yes,
you had
exactly.
That consistent, right?
Yep. That grew with me, that adapted with me, that let me expand when it was safe and when I felt ready to expand. And so I feel I'm more of a mentor guardian now in that sense. And my children are thriving there. As with any business, there's, that can go toe to toe with so many things that, I'd love to help do more there as far as a business standpoint, but I see that it's a perfect either stepping stone or it's progress. Like it's something, it's happening. There's a creation happening that I'm really excited about. And it could be taken in different levels too, different ways and all over. And I think it is, because I've been speaking more online, I'm meeting people who like on the East Coast, they have a similar sort of learning center, and Florida, Texas, all these states are starting to branch off and do something different in that sense. And that's having a child-led learning facility. It's really under the homeschool umbrella. So they really don't have state mandates on them. There's a lot more freedom. They do believe in sovereign civilians of free will. But what I'm finding in this particular place, which is in Los Angeles, you bring all walks of life, but I am starting to interact too with those with innate psychic abilities. And, I'm starting to run into some of those children, but I'm also noticing, which I know we'll talk in length about, but to me, all children, all humans have the ability to become superhuman. So I'm sure we'll tap into it more. But that was my bridge, motion picture into teaching. There you go.
So the curriculum at the learning center you're at is, I think you mentioned before, it's kind of a Rudolf Steiner, Waldorf kind of model.
Yes, it's a model after Steiner for sure. It's not like a fully accredited Waldorf brick and mortar school, but the staff, the admin, we do admire Steiner's philosophy. He did believe in child-led learning education and the mind, body, will of the child. And it's really maintaining and amplifying the soul of the child. And that just resonated huge with me. I was like, okay, this is the woo too, without, really knowing it's the woo. And everything, what I love too, it's very developmentally appropriate in age, because all the old systems are very rushed. You're rushing, you're dumbing down, you're numbing, you're conforming, you're putting them in boxes, whereas this is the slow bloom. And you can't deny the results. I'll just say that.
Well, oh God, there's so many. You just dropped a couple of nuggets on there, and now I'm going to go look for a particular piece which I think speaks directly to what you're saying about the way in which education has been kind of hijacked.
Yes.
And that's really one of the things that is created this, contributed at a minimum, and maybe been a major catalyst to this delineation of super versus normal human.
Absolutely.
Because
big part of it.
There's been a repackaging of our little carbon-based units that we are creating and trying to, in the old view, create free labor.
That's it. Work for the man, yeah. Conform and fall in line. And that's old school. This is Rockefeller. This is, Rothschild. Yeah. This is old school. All those rabbit holes. But yeah. And then when I saw them in the medical came in, and seeing lights get turned off, and I was just dumbfounded. I go, whoa, where are we going here? But not having any children of my own, I was in my 20s, it was kind of all about me. I'm like, oh, I'll just go over here then. That doesn't look appealing anymore. Now I'm just like dug my heels in, especially when my children were born, and I saw the human interference on their spirit, on their soul that was happening. And it was so like I was out of the norm for wanting to protect their spirit. And I'm like, well, this is really backwards. So I really started digging my heels in just to protect them even more. And I'm like, we have a big problem here. And I'm like, oh, this has been a slow drip of an involvement, underneath, behind the shadows. People weren't noticing all this creep in. And now there's such a stronghold that I feel like, yes, those systems have to collapse, but more than anything, we just have to stop participating and walk away. And because as long as there's going to be someone that believes that old model is the way to do things, then it's going to continue to exist. So we have to take it on over there.
Yeah, to me, this is, we've heard we've talked about, you mentioned that, since the scamdemic popped out, to me, that was clearly orchestrated, planned, and it was a great, I give them an A+ on effort, on packaging, because there's nothing more motivating to humans than a silent, deadly killer.
Yep.
So the fear factor is like, bring it on. So they did great there, but they've just stumbled at one after another of the execution and the follow-up. And now here we are 4+ years later, I guess, and we're looking at all the data and we're going, okay, you clearly can't hide the bullshit that you just put everybody through anymore.
Yes. Yes, and I think because there's a huge population that's really quiet right now, and because of the choices they made and the segregation they were putting everybody through. But then there's people such as myself who got a little more empowered, going, wow, not only did I not bow down, but as a parent, I showed my children what standing up for yourself means and how to do it with grace and dignity, and to not really. I started to cause a scene. I started to march. I started to do those things, and I got a little sicker. And I'm like, we have to just create our beings. We have to create something new. So
Hmm.
watching us go through that whole movement and to find out where we came out at the end, now we're just standing there welcoming these waves of people going, I think I made a mistake. It's like,
Yeah,
I got
isn't it
you.
true?
Mhm.
Have you run into anybody yet that
Yeah,
didn't take the jab and is remorseful that they didn't?
absolutely not. Quite the opposite.
Right?
Quite the opposite.
So I went through
Hmm.
that same thing as soon as it came out. In fact, the last show that I did on the previous iteration of the Nexus was December. I think I did it New Year's Eve or Christmas of 2019.
Hmm. That's,
So it was just before this shit was about to roll out.
hmm.
And the title of the show was The Knowledge Apocalypse,
Hmm.
the end of the curated narrative. Because my observation of pattern recognition and trends analysis pointed that, over the last 2.5 decades, I've been deep into exploring woo. And it actually goes back over 3 decades when I became a shiatsu practitioner in
Nice.
Southern California in 1985. And I had to learn traditional Chinese medicine,
Nice.
kinesiology, all the massage techniques. And shiatsu is Japanese for acupressure.
Yes, it's my favorite.
Me and needles, we're not compatible at all. And so, but using the same meridians and the same points, you can still achieve some amazing effects. So
Hmm.
that was my burst away from the allopathic model
Hmm.
because I realized that all of that was just had way too many holes in it.
Yep. It's just
So
money. Hmm.
yeah, I mean, follow the money pox. Remember the K is silent in the
Oh,
monkey
yeah.
pox, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one.
So when this is my observation and what I was doing in my trend analysis made me do this show saying basically everything we've been told is about to be revealed as being bullshit. And it's across everything.
Yeah.
It's
All
not
industry.
just
Hmm.
medicine, it's education, it's the academia institutions, the
Hmm.
financial institutions, the governance and
Government.
administrative institutions.
Hmm.
It's all broke.
Hmm.
So we started to hear, the people talking about the great reveal, the great rethink, the great reset. To me, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you, you and I are working on what I think is about to happen, which is the great reimagining.
Ooh, I like that name. It's my next tattoo. Yes, that's what
Because
it, yeah, the creation of the new.
because we
Yeah.
now have the opportunity through all these experiences, all this knowledge. I mean, when they unleashed the net of knowledge back in the 90s, and I was right in the middle of that, I don't think that they whoever they are thought that it would get away from them, but
Uh-huh.
it did.
Yes. Yes. That's true.
And with the releasing of the beast of knowledge to the wild, people like you and me and all the folks that we talk to online in our shows and just our shorts, right?
Uh-huh. Hmm.
We're all looking at it going, yeah, there's dumpster fires everywhere. There's train wrecks everywhere. There are lunatics everywhere.
Yeah.
The masses of the mental and mobs, well, it's on display right now in Chicago, as a matter of fact,
Yes.
without getting into that realm, but just as a general observation. So I think what's happened in a lot of ways, and I believe in this basic model of philosophy ontology, is that we are here because we chose to be here. And we chose to be here and now to be a part of not only the great reveal, which is the fact that everything is bullshit, and then transform that into the great reimagining. So what would it be if we were dealing with just the facts, not somebody's truth, which is basically a fact that somebody's wrapped their shit around?
Yes. That's the authentic. Yes. Yes. I know. I'm like, which tangent do I go on this one?
I could see two of them trigger. Go, pick one and go.
I know. I'm like, well, as much as you were saying, I remember 90s and I remember the web coming out. I'm an Oregon Trail girl. But the information war that's out there, you're getting, we've quadrupled, even more than that, the charlatans out there. As much as we actually had the opportunity in 2020 to all be stuck at home and research ourselves, they're like, uh-oh, they're finding out things. And then more junk gets thrown in. But this is where I get excited, where, I'm not surprised you dabbled in the woo and studied Eastern medicine, all that. We've been taking care of our meat suits and lining up enough that we can discern the bullshit, as well as, and that comes with the information we come across and the people we meet. And these communities are flooded with the charlatans right now who just have they're storytellers and not a lot of sauce to back it up. And wasn't that the whole thing in 2016 or 2018 to 2020? Like, where's the sauce? Where's the proof? Where's the proof?
Mm-hmm.
And here come all these proofs and these drops and things. But show me more, show me more. And then you realize it doesn't matter what I show you. Someone is not going to be able to dissect or discern or whatever. So I honestly, it comes to a point where you're watching this war of information go on. And you're like, you guys fight over there and chew on the fat. I'm going to build over here and create, because after a while, they're just swirling in this information, like circle jerk of egos. And
I call it a tsunami of shit, of mental gymnastics and fortification.
I like that one. What's that acronym? There's some merch. Yeah. And it's like, it's exhausting, because then even online, it's like, insert opinion. I'm like, well, but who closes the laptop and goes out and does something about it? Who takes their stories and their experience and then goes out and goes, well, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to flip it light out there in the world, no matter what the people around me are thinking and feeling. I'm just going to go do. And that's where this percentage gets really small. And the last few years, the world has allowed us to see that. If you're tuned in, I guess, you can really find who is doing the work and who's just talking, who's a talking head, another talking head. And then it goes, well, who's an infiltrated talking head? Who's an alphabet agency talking head? Like it just keeps going and going. And then I just go click and I close the laptop and I go focus on the kids. Yeah. That one, there's a couple tangents there, but I see what you're saying, especially resonate with, everyone taking the time and having an opportunity to research for themselves. And then even that got overwhelming and taken over. And, well, I found this information and your information is wrong because I got this information. All I know is if you have a belief system, no matter what it is, you could think cockroaches or kings and queens in royalty or something, you're going to find that information online now. So it's kind of like you have to back your stuff up with human experience, with insight, with your own truths, and not care what other people think, but also pay attention to who can't back their stuff up.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it's all speculation.
Yes.
Nobody has any kind of fact other than what they have in their own personal experience, and then how they can express that in a way that is either demonstrable, at a minimum has some kind of credibility. And one of there was a couple of things that when I watched the whole shutdown thing, I'm sitting back going, okay, you guys are really going for the mother load here. Let's see how this works. So a couple of months into it, I was just outside of Durango, and I said, well, they're saying don't go anywhere, don't go do anything, stay in your room until we tell you it's okay to come out.
Yeah.
get in there and do some navel gazing,
Yeah.
eat your
Call tattle on
Cheetos
your
and watch
neighbors.
Netflix.
Tattle on your
Right,
neighbors
yeah.
if they have more than 5 people. Yeah. Yeah.
So I went to downtown Durango and I looked around and I thought, wow, I've never seen it this clean. Aside from not being, full of people. But, everybody got all paranoid about you got to wipe and spray everything down and wash it down and pressure wash this and shovel that and sweep this. And it was like, wow, I don't think this town has been this clean since they probably made it.
It's like, finally, someone
So,
cleaned it up.
yeah, so I thought, well, there's a benefit to
Yeah,
what's
there's a
going on
positive.
here.
Mm-hmm.
And another benefit was, because of the nature of this silent, deadly killer being basically focused around hygiene, people started that hadn't ever and probably needed to relook at hygiene, and they started to clean themselves up a little bit.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
You started to be a little bit more conscious about, you got to keep stuff clean because this thing's silent, it's invisible, and it could be anywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
But these plexiglass
Oh, it was
separators will
so
protect
funny.
us.
Yeah.
And don't forget to put something on your face and breathe all of the crap that you're supposed to be exhaling for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, just the illogic of that just was phenomenally amazing to me.
Yeah, we were living in a SNL skit.
Right? And now you still have there's a few that are out there in the wild that are still wearing them.
Yep.
And they're even wearing them while they're driving in a car by themselves.
Yeah, with the windows rolled up.
And all that tells me is that there's some mental illness going on.
Yes.
That is the result of decades of programming.
Yep.
The whole concept of MK Ultra and the Mockingbird Project Mockingbird. I mean, which we just did a show with the Geezers where it was Polly Want a Cracker. And it was about the media. It's not legacy media. It's not lamestream media or mainstream media. It's Mockingbird media.
Mm-hmm.
Because all they do is repeat the same shit. And it's amazing how people don't pay attention to this tsunami of shit that's coming in as a data deluge. And none of the education that any of us have gone through, none of the mentorships. I think mentors, I know in my life, I had some awesome dudes that knocked me upside the noggin and went, dude, watch this and you'll learn. I went, oh, thank you very much for pointing that out.
Uh-huh.
So mentors are really important, but the system has been so corrupt for so long, and it's been hijacked, that it has created people that no longer know how to think. They only know what to think.
Yep. It was created that way. It was intended that way.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And to that, I want to play this short piece by Sir Ken Robinson.
Every country on earth at the moment is reforming public education. There are two reasons for it. The first of them is economic. People are trying to work out, how do we educate our children to take their place in the economies of the 21st century? How do we do that, given that we can't anticipate what the economy will look like at the end of next week, as the recent turmoil is demonstrating? How do we do that? The second, though, is cultural. Every country on earth is trying to figure out, how do we educate our children so they have a sense of cultural identity and so that we can pass on the cultural genes of our communities while being part of the process of globalization? How do we square that circle? The problem is they're trying to meet the future by doing what they did in the past. And on the way, they're alienating millions of kids who don't see any purpose in going to school. When we went to school, we were kept there with a story, which is if you worked hard and did well and got a college degree, you would have a job. Our kids don't believe that. And they're right not to, by the way. You're better having a degree than not, but it's not a guarantee anymore. And particularly not if the route to it marginalizes most of the things that you think are important about yourself. And some people say we have to raise standards as if this is a breakthrough. You know, like, really, yes, we should. Why would you lower them? You know, I mean, I haven't come across an argument that persuades me of lowering them. But raising them, of course we should raise them. The problem is that the current system of education was designed and conceived and structured for a different age. It was conceived in the intellectual culture of the Enlightenment and in the economic circumstances of the Industrial Revolution. Before the middle of the 19th century, there were no systems of public education. Not really. I mean, you could get educated by Jesuits, if you had the money. But public education, paid for from taxation, compulsory to everybody and free at the point of delivery, that was a revolutionary idea. And many people objected to it. They said it's not possible for many street kids, working class children, to benefit from public education. They're incapable of learning to read and write, and why are we spending time on this? So there's also built into it a whole series of assumptions about social structure and capacity. It was driven by an economic imperative of the time, but running right through it was an intellectual model of the mind, which was essentially the Enlightenment view of intelligence. That real intelligence consists in the capacity for a certain type of deductive reasoning and a knowledge of the classics originally, what we come to think of as academic ability. And this is deep in the gene pool of public education, that there are really two types of people, academic and non-academic, smart people and non-smart people. And the consequence of that is that many brilliant people think they're not, because they've been judged against this particular view of the mind. So we have twin pillars, economic and intellectual. And my view is that this model has caused chaos in many people's lives. It's been great for some. There have been people who have benefited wonderfully from it. But most people have not. Instead, they suffer this. This is the modern epidemic, and it's as misplaced and it's as fictitious. This is the plague of ADHD. Now, this is a map of the incidence of ADHD in America, or prescriptions for ADHD. Don't mistake me here. I don't mean to say there is no such thing as attention deficit disorder. I'm not qualified to say if there is such a thing. I know that a great majority of psychologists and paediatricians think there is such a thing, but it's still a matter of debate. What I do know for a fact is it's not an epidemic. These kids are being medicated as routinely as we had our tonsils taken out, and on the same whimsical basis and for the same reason, medical fashion. Our children are living in the most intensely stimulating period in the history of the earth. They're being besieged with information and calls for their attention from every platform, computers, from iPhones, from advertising hoardings, from hundreds of television channels. And we're penalizing them now for getting distracted. From what? Boring stuff at school, for the most part. It seems to me it's not a coincidence totally that the incidence of ADHD has risen in parallel with the growth of standardized testing. Now, these kids are being given Ritalin and Adderall and all manner of things, often quite dangerous drugs, to get them focused and calm them down. But according to this, attention deficit disorder increases as you travel east across the country. People start losing interest in Oklahoma. They can hardly think straight in Arkansas. And by the time they get to Washington, they've lost it completely. And there are separate reasons for that, I believe. It's a fictitious epidemic. If you think of it, the arts, and I don't say this exclusively of the arts, I think it's also true of science and of maths, but I say about the arts particularly because they are the victims of this mentality currently, particularly. The arts especially address the idea of aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is one in which your senses are operating at their peak, when you're present in the current moment, when you're resonating with the excitement of this thing that you're experiencing, when you are fully alive. An anesthetic is when you shut your senses off and deaden yourself to what's happening. And a lot of these drugs are that. We're getting our children through education by anesthetizing them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep. We should be waking them up to what they have inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modeled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. We put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? Why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? It's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. What do you mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm. There was a great study done recently of divergent thinking. Published a couple of years ago. Divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's an essential capacity for creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what Edward de Bono would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. So, there are tests for this. One kind of cod example would be people might be asked to say, how many uses can you think of for a paperclip? One of those routine questions. Most people might come up with 10 or 15. People who are good at this might come up with 200. And they do that by saying, well, could the paperclip be 200 foot tall and be made out of foam rubber? Does it have to be a paperclip as we know it, Jim? Now, there are tests for this, and they gave them to 1,500 people. This is in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And on the protocol of the test, if you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. Okay? So my question to you is, what percentage of the people tested, of the 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking? Now, you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage at genius level? 80. 80, okay. 98%. Now, the thing about this was it was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, ages of 8 to 10. What do you think? 50? They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend here, can't you? Now, this tells an interesting story, because you could have imagined it going the other way, couldn't you? You start off not being very good, but you get better as you get older. But this shows two things. One is we all have this capacity, and two, it mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up. A lot. But one of the most important things that happened to them, I'm convinced, is that by now they've become educated. They've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. Outside schools, that's called collaboration, but inside schools. Now, this isn't because teachers want it this way. It's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education. We have to think differently about human capacity. We have to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, abstract, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is, a myth. Secondly, we have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups, that collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning environment. And thirdly, it's crucially about the culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats that they occupy.
I need to blast that. That was absolutely amazing. What he said.
That was, yeah,
Ditto.
that was some of the most concise, precise, and inclusive description of what is and why and what its problems are that I've seen, period.
So well done. And even the visual. Someone like me, because I learn differently than others. I like the visual, and that was fantastic. That should be required viewing for parents with school-age children because they have choices. Everybody has a choice. So
Well, and in some ways,
Wow.
it might be kind of not necessarily age specific, but I think kids should see this.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm going to show mine. Absolutely. That was so well done. That was fantastic. And that was all my little thoughts and talking points, by the way. And of course, even though we just talked raw in the beginning, I immediately went to the medical and the interference, the human interference, and then showing what we are doing. So that was my brain right there.
Well, now you know why I wanted to share that with you in this conversation.
Yes, absolutely.